Nature's fury spares no one. And in this gripping tale of rising floodwaters, entire villages are swept away, lives are lost, and hope hangs by a fragile thread. As the death toll climbs, the fate of Officer Lee remains a haunting mystery. Was he taken by the flood, or is he still out there fighting to survive? For Sam and Lee's sister, each moment is an agonizing wait, until one day a body is found, bringing both crushing grief and a glimmer of hope. Stay with us, subscribe now, and follow this emotional journey of courage, sacrifice, and the desperate search for survival. The floodwaters rose with a ferocity no one had anticipated, swallowing everything in their path with terrifying speed. Rain had battered the region for days, relentless and merciless, until the earth could no longer absorb a single drop. Rivers swelled beyond their banks, and what had once been quiet villages and fertile farmlands now lay submerged beneath a churning sea of brown, violent water. Entire homes were uprooted, carried away like fragile toys in the grip of nature's fury. Livestock, once the livelihood of countless families, vanished in the torrents, their desperate cries silenced by the roar of the storm. The once familiar landscape was unrecognizable. Roads had disappeared, fields transformed into lakes, and trees bent under the weight of the relentless current. With every passing hour, the destruction grew worse, as if the flood had a cruel determination to strip away all signs of life and hope. Families huddled together on makeshift rafts or clung desperately to rooftops, their eyes wide with fear as the water rose higher, threatening to engulf them at any moment. The air was thick with panic and despair, pierced by the cries of children and the anguished shouts of those searching for loved ones. Rescue teams worked frantically, risking their own lives to reach stranded villagers, but the scale of the disaster was overwhelming. Despite their courage, the flood seemed always one step ahead, sweeping away bridges, tearing down barriers, and cutting off escape routes. Most haunting of all was the growing toll on human lives. Each day brought news of more casualties, more people unaccounted for. The death toll climbed steadily, and the list of the missing lengthened like a wound that refused to heal. It was no longer just a natural disaster. It was a tragedy, carving itself into the hearts of everyone who lived through it. Mothers wept inconsolably for children they could not find, while fathers stood silent, their faces etched with a grief too heavy for words. Entire communities were bound together by loss, their collective sorrow echoing louder than the storm itself. In the midst of it all, the unshakable truth became clear. The flood was not simply water rushing through the land. It was a relentless, merciless force that consumed lives, homes, and dreams, leaving behind nothing but devastation and questions no one could answer. Yet, amid the chaos and devastation, one absence loomed larger than all others: the disappearance of Officer Lee. He had been seen last rushing toward the rising waters, his uniform soaked and his voice hoarse from shouting orders as he guided villagers to higher ground. Witnesses recalled how he had pulled a child from the flood, handed the trembling boy to safety, and then turned back toward the raging current without hesitation. After that moment, no one could say where he had gone. His name appeared on the growing list of the missing, and with it came a silence heavy enough to break the spirit of those who loved him. For Sam and Lee's older sister, the uncertainty was unbearable. Every hour stretched into eternity as they waited, listening for updates, clinging to the fragile hope that somewhere, somehow, he was still alive. Sam, with eyes swollen from sleepless nights, replayed every memory of Lee. The warmth of his laugh, the steadiness of his gaze, the unyielding sense of duty that had defined his every action. To lose him to the flood would mean losing more than a brother, more than a friend. It would mean losing the anchor that had kept their small family from drifting apart. His sister's grief was quieter, but no less fierce. She sat in silence, her hands trembling as she clutched a photograph of him, her lips moving in desperate prayers that dissolved into tears. The village shared their torment. Whispers spread through the crowded shelters. Perhaps he had found refuge on higher ground. Perhaps he was trapped somewhere waiting for rescue. Or perhaps, though no one dared to say it aloud, the river had already claimed him. The question lingered like a shadow in every conversation. Was Officer Lee still alive? And if not, where was he now? The search teams combed through the debris, dragged the river, and sent boats deeper into the flood zones. But each effort ended in the same bitter report: no trace. Every knock at the shelter door, every radio crackle, every faint sound of footsteps set Sam's heart racing, caught between dread and fragile hope. The storm had stolen so much already, but nothing compared to the agony of not knowing. To bury the dead was grief, but to wait for the missing was torment without end. And in that torment, the people clung to one thought. Perhaps Lee, brave to his final breath, was still out there, fighting, surviving, waiting to come home. Then came the night when a grim report reached the shelter. A body had been recovered from the swollen river. The news rippled through the crowd like a cold wind, and for Sam and Lee's sister, the world seemed to collapse around them. Their legs weakened beneath the weight of dread as they followed the rescuers, each step heavy with the fear that the face beneath the shroud would be the one they loved most. Tears streamed unchecked, their cries raw and unrestrained, echoing the grief of countless others who had already faced the same unbearable fate. In those moments, hope and despair clashed violently in their hearts, longing for it not to be Lee, yet trembling at the cruel possibility that it was. At the riverbank, silence fell. The rescuers gently laid the lifeless figure before them. Sam clutched Lee's sister's hand, their knuckles white with fear, their bodies trembling. The cloth was pulled back and time seemed to stop. For a heartbeat, the world was too quiet, as though holding its breath with them. Then a sob burst from Lee's sister, not of recognition, but of overwhelming relief. It was not Lee. The face was familiar, yes, but it belonged to another, a fellow officer, a brother in arms who had fought the same fight against the flood, only to give his life in service of others. Relief swept over Sam and his sister, crashing against their grief like waves in a storm. They clung to each other, grateful Lee's name had been spared for now, but shattered by the loss that still lay before them. The fallen officer was no stranger. He had shared meals with Lee, laughed with him, trained alongside him. Now he had been reduced to silence, a silent testament to the courage and sacrifice demanded by duty. His body bore the marks of his final struggle, his final act of defiance against the merciless floodwaters. As villagers gathered to honor him, candles flickered in the night, their light trembling in the wind. Sam stood motionless, caught between relief and sorrow, his chest heavy with emotions too tangled to name. Lee was still missing, his fate unknown, but tonight they mourned another hero. The tragedy was no less piercing for not being personal. It was a wound to the community, to every soul who had believed their protectors would stand invincible against the storm. Yet even through their grief, one fragile ember of hope endured. If Lee had not been found among the dead, then perhaps, somewhere beyond the darkness, he was still alive, still fighting to return home.
Hello, xin chào tất cả các khán giả của kênh Lý Tử Sam Review. Vậy là tập phim của chúng ta ngày hôm nay đã kết thúc tại đây. Tập phim ngày hôm nay thật là nhiều cảm xúc đúng không các bạn? Nếu các bạn thấy tập phim ngày hôm nay hay, hấp dẫn, mới lạ thì hãy cho mình xin nút like, nút chia sẻ và để lại bình luận ở dưới video nhé. Đặc biệt là các bạn đừng quên hãy bấm vào nút đăng ký kênh subscribe ở dưới video để nhận được thông báo mới nhất về các tập phim sẽ được phát sóng hàng ngày trên kênh Lý Tử Sam Review, để biết được là nội dung câu chuyện mới tiếp theo, cảnh sát Nhi có còn sống sót hay không, Lý Tử Sam có cứu được anh kịp thời hay không. Tất cả tình tiết hấp dẫn sẽ còn ở phía sau, các bạn hãy đón xem nhé. Cảm ơn các bạn rất nhiều, xin chào và hẹn gặp lại vào ngày mai. Bye bye.